Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar today, Lighting and Look Development Automation in Katana, Preparing for Success. My name is Elise and I'm Field Marketing Specialist here at Foundry. Today I am going to give a quick marketing update as well as introduce our guest speaker, Abel Vargas, and two members of the Foundry team, Jordan Thistlewood and Gary Jones. Fortunately, Gary didn't make it onto the slide, but he is a surprise guest today. He'll be helping out with the Q&A. We're going to start off with what's going on in Katana, and then we'll move on to Abel's presentation. Just to make everybody aware, Abel's presentation has been pre-recorded for quality purposes. Also, this presentation in entirety is going to be recorded, and a link will be sent directly to your inbox when we're done. The session will wrap up with a live Q&A, so if you have any questions that you would like to ask the team, just pop it into the questions tab. So yes, thank you for joining our webinar and being part of our virtual event series. Today, I think is our 21st or 22nd virtual event. And our virtual events have been a mix of webinars, skill-ups, and sessions. Webinars are technical deep dives, skill-ups are focused on career advancement, and sessions are panel-like conversations with industry professionals. All of our virtual events are available on demand, and you can either find that on our Foundry Livestorm page or by going to our website, foundry.com/events. Also, if you'd like to participate in our virtual events or have any feedback, we would love to hear it. So please reach out to us at virtual.events@foundry.com. And then looking forward to the next couple of weeks, we have some great virtual events planned. On June 30th, we'll be doing a rerun of Courtney Price's Skill Up on becoming a senior compositor. The week after that, we have another skill up on Nuke Studio and Hero, which will be focused on the basics of review and VFX editorial. On the 9th of July, we have a session about using Nuke in the cloud with AWS. And then on July 16th through July 21st, we'll be doing Foundry Live. And Foundry Live is going to be our biggest event series thus far. And it will be focused on product and customer workflows, as well as some sneak peeks into our upcoming product releases. So we're happy that you're staying connected with us via these virtual events, but we do encourage you to stay connected either on social media or by checking out our Insights Hub. If you like what you see on the Insights Hub, we encourage you to also subscribe to the quarterly newsletter. And just on some content for Katana, on the top line here, you can see our recent articles and case studies that have been featured on the Insights Hub. And then also we have our learn.foundry.com/Katana site, and there's some great resources available there. I know that it was recently updated, so even if you've checked out the Learn channel before, we encourage you to go back and see what's new. I'd also like to take this opportunity to shout out our industry partners, including Access VFX, the Academy Software Foundation, SIGGRAPH, and the Visual Effects Society. And these are all great organizations, and if you have some extra time, we certainly encourage you to get involved. Also, I'd just like to make everybody aware that the Computer Animation Festival, which is part of SIGGRAPH Asia, is currently taking submissions. So if you'd like to submit your work or are interested in finding out more, I'll pop the link into the chat. And if you are interested in submitting your work, just please be aware that the deadline is July 31st. Also just like to take this opportunity to thank everybody who's participated in our virtual events thus far and helped to make it such a great success. In particular, we'd like to thank Atomic Cartoons today for lending Abel to us and giving his time and talent. We really appreciate it, and we have a great webinar for you today. So with that being said, I'm going to let Jordan take the stage, give an update on Katana.
Oh, thank you, Elise. So welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. It's going to be a very exciting presentation. I had a bit of a sneak peek in, so Abel is going to provide you a lot of very, very cool info. And the fact that we've been able to record it so that we can stream it to you without interruption means that we can all be answering questions for you in the questions window. So just like housekeeping, we got the chat window. If you put it all into the questions tab, that'll help us keep it all going cleanly. On the Katana 3.6 front, it's been done and dusted for a while. We were just cleaning up all the logistics of getting it shipped out to you guys. So now that it's out, we've got some great material on our website, but really the things you got to know about Katana 3.6, we included a really powerful snapping workflow. This is something that Gary and the team really worked hard on. And the thing about Katana being a specialized tool means that we could take steps in tools like snapping that were very specific to the workflows that you guys do in look development and lighting. So please do check those out. We also introduced docs into the UI. So now what you can do, you can see on the right-hand side of the image, you've got the parameters pane. So you can take any of your tabs within Katana and lock them to the left, the right, the top, or the bottom. So then when you take anything full screen, you're still left with that. So this is a common workflow you're going to see. This is the monitor layer where you can render directly into the viewer, but you can still have your parameters available to you. So super powerful, all sort of fitting into our vision of how all this can come together for sort of a super rich viewer-driven artist experience. We introduced the Network Material Edit. So this replaces two tools, one called the Network Material Parameter Edit and the Network Material Splice. Those of you who know Katana know that they were powerful, but they weren't the most artist-friendly. So what we've done is taken the power of both of those two tools and combined them into a framework and a node that basically gives you the exact same representation of the network material as you created it in the new network material create node, which we introduced in 3.2. And so that's a great next step. So the other thing for you to keep in mind, new version of 3D Light that ships with Katana. So, new live rendering, some new texturing tools and tune shading, but it just gives you a nice robust experience right out of the box. If you download our trial today, you can install that with Katana, and there's no configuration. You can just start playing and learning Katana. So if you're new to Katana, we've got you covered from that angle. And I would also encourage you very strongly to join us for our CGRAPH events. Gary will be presenting the next version of Katana and sneak peeks into what that means for this year. And I promise you, you will not regret joining us for that event. So thank you very much for joining us. And I think from there, we will then queue up the video and we'll start joining you guys in the chat and everything else.
Alrighty, hello everyone. Thank you for joining me in this fine morning, at least here in Vancouver, for this lighting and look dev automation in Katana, preparing for success. And these are my personal tips on how to be able to produce more using Katana tools and some of the new Katana 3.6 updates. My name is Abel Vargas. I am a lighter and compositor. I live here in Vancouver and I've worked at a few VFX companies and in the animation companies in this industry. I've worked exclusively as a compositor at DNEG, Method, and Animal, and I've also worked as a compositor at Zoic, and in a different season I also worked in there as a lighter. ImageWorks, Cinesight, and Atomic are the animation companies. Atomic is the one I'm currently working at, and these are the three companies that I've worked for that use Katana. And this is my, I'm talking on top of this experience working with in these pipelines. And you might ask me, okay, so these are big companies. How can I use this? What's in this for me as either a smaller company or as a freelancer? How can you get productive and be prepared for success while you're using Katana? And I'm going to tell you that. Better yet, I will show you. For this webinar, I actually built a little short project, if I may call it a short film, but it's very short. This is only 4 shots long. It's called Ground Zero because I had to name it something to make it cool. And in this short, I'm going to, I kind of designed it to be able to use all of these updates for Katana 3.6. That's snapping, docking panels, network material edit, and kind of show it how I would use this in my own pipeline. This is a pretty ambitious project for a single artist. I have 168 assets, over 40 materials. These are 4 shots, and I've done less than 40 hours of work. So if I was working full time in this from Monday to Friday, I'd be done. and I will also show a few tools that I love about Katana that are not an update for this version, but I feel like we should all be very familiar with them, which are variables, the monitor layer, and some collections. So there's 3 key points that I'd like you to take away from this webinar. And the first one is to always consider volume. And if you can expand on the work you've done, every good artist can use any software and any technique really just to create great work. But if you take great work and now you need to expand that into a whole sequence, a whole episode, a whole feature film, then you need to consider volume, and a volume and a way of working that will preserve this quality of work that you've dedicated in this one shot and turning that into multiple shots. So this volume means a different type of organization and a different type of considering what's coming up in your way. And of course, with more industry experience, you can already you already know what you're to expect most of the times. So there are a few things that you can do ahead of time, and I'm going to go over that very soon. And the third thing is just consider the bottlenecks in your pipeline. I feel like before Katana came along and was like widespread in the industry as it is today, one of the biggest the pipeline bottlenecks were lighting. Lighting and rendering has always been like this, where everything slows down, and also that slows down compositing. So how do we solve this bottleneck in your pipeline? So when you look at your own workflow and how these steps are laid out, you have to consider where your time is really being spent on. And I'm hoping that you can spend more time doing artistic things over being stuck in pipeline problems and doing repetitious work. And I feel like Katana really solved that for Lookdev lighting and connecting that into a render farm. So without further ado, here's the short, and then I will come back and then I will break down the most important steps that I took to be able to deliver this. Alrighty. There was some epic sound effects that I I bought just to put on this short. I felt like sound is something very important to to add to this VFX sci-fi show, so I put that on. If you only like the opening credits, that it's the only thing I didn't do. So go to the internet, I guess, look for better templates. So first thing I want to give credits. These all the buildings, the roads, everything you see there, the structure part is they are Kitbash 3D assets. Kitbash is a big time saver, and one of the things that when I talked about like finding what's your bottleneck for me is assets. I'm not a modeler, and I want to build these worlds. So Kitbash 3D does this amazing service that they sell these products and these packages where they have a theme. So this one that I use the most is called Future Slums. And the sad part of Future Slums that it really looks like São Paulo, Brazil today. So it's not really future. It's present for me, I guess. So the work that they do is really important, especially for us lighters who don't model. So take a look at their website. The ship, this amazing design, was done by my good friend Leo Kreiding. He is a senior modeler at Method Studios, and he has done amazing creatures for Godzilla, for Thor. So this guy is as good as you can get in this industry, and I'm very thankful for him to actually doing the ship for me, and he's always very helpful and a very good friend of mine. The HDRs that I use are from HDR Maps. This is a website that sells very good HDR, so you can go there and take a look at it. And Redshift is the render engine I chose for this project only because my home computer is designed for GPU rendering, and I really like Redshift. I've done a few freelance works with it, so I'm very comfortable with the tool, and they have a pretty nice integration with Katana. The best integration with Katana is easily 3D Light that comes with Katana, so I'll definitely use more 3D Light in the future. This one I kept using Redshift. And one very important credit I need to give is to Foundry's community. I depend on them. I depend on this community for most of the things that I do, especially all these scripts that I've developed for this project. They were people in the community are always very nice and friendly, and you can see, like, this is the most recent screenshot. I'm there right at the top, and I'm everywhere, always asking my questions there. And thank you, Jordan, for being there for me most of the times. And Gary, awesome person, he helped me on all of my scripts to get this done, so I do owe him a keg of beer. I promised, and one day I hope after this pandemic is done, I can come to London and pay him that keg of beer. I hope he can. I hope he likes beer, I guess. So let's think. Let's see how this is done. The first thing is preparing the assets to go into Katana, right? And I did one thing that was very important for me in this project is to add an attribute to all the alembics with the shader name, to every object in each alembic with the shader name, so I can do automatic assignments in Katana. So you see me here opening the assets, the packages, and these are how they come. So I actually center everything and export one by one. This one I did one by one just to show how it would look, this whole process of if I didn't have a script for this. So I spent a little bit of time doing this recording just to show that it can't be done by hand, but I actually have a script that will export all of these assets in one go and add the attributes that with the shader name for each shape. And you can see this script if you're interested in my GitHub. And I'll put the link. I think it will show up very soon, and I will show it once again before this presentation is over. So this is, I'm generating all these assets and adding these attributes, and the kitbash 3D assets, they already come with the attribute, but for Leo's ship and it's tons of objects that are in there, I created those attributes myself and then exported everything to Katana. So now that everything was ready to go to Katana, I could actually start working. This was all just prep work, right? Okay, so let's quickly talk about the things that are very important to think about productivity and volume, and I'll keep talking about, like, the things I find interesting and the cool new updates that Katana 3.6 has. For the updates, it will probably be more connected to lighting, but I just want to go over how you can work in volume in your Lookdev recipe. And the first thing to keep in mind is collections. Collections are one of the most powerful things you can do in Katana, and once you start working with them, it's really hard to go back to doing assignments by hand, even if it's not a lot of materials. The way collections work is that they are just little containers of scene graph locations. You can put paths, just groups, or you can go all the way down to the mesh. It's up to you, the way you want to work. If you have a character that keeps using the same props, you can do a collection that is the character and the props, so you can easily just create a new render layer and assign that one collection that it will always contain the character and the props. For example, the way I'm working here is working with materials, because I'm just working with the Lookdev now. And since I have this thing coming from let me change this asset real quick and get something with more variation. Tower. There you go. So looking from here, this is how the asset comes in, and it has a bunch of objects, and these objects they have different materials for them. The way we brought it from Maya is not this guy there. Every shape in this object, in this asset, has a arbitrary attribute called max material name that came with the kitbash 3D assets. They probably didn't use this for Katana. They were thinking of max at the time, probably. I don't know. But I created my own for the ship that Leo graciously lended me to use in this project, and I created a material name tag without the max and just added the name of the shader assigned to it from Maya. So now I have all of my my shapes with the shader name, and based on these names here, I'm creating my collections, and these collections are a very powerful but simple line of code, which is here. When you look at what this line is saying, is for anything recursively, anything, literally anything inside world geo, so we got here root world geo, anything inside underneath this group here, it will collect anything that has the attribute called max material name, and which has the value of concrete mix. So once I select these guys, what this line of code returns are these objects. And the cool thing is that this is not relying on the name of the object. So this could be duplicated, change names, go into version 345 or sidewall B. You can have anything, and a lot of freedom in naming, even though you have to have a naming convention to use in different stages. But at least for here, I'm just relying on this value here. And the way I test this very easily without having to render anything is I create all of these, one per material. And you see, like, it only changes this last thing. So they're all looking for the same attribute and just matching to whatever the name of the attribute contains, of the shader in this case. So once I have created one per material, and this kind of goes back and forth, I will import new materials that have a different material that I haven't anticipated. So I can just create this collection and change this name here, and boom, now I have the trash bags inside a collection. And the way I test this is creating these viewer object settings. And the viewer object settings only affect the viewer, so it doesn't affect the render at all. But the cool thing about this is that if I can add a color just for the viewer. So this is a very simple thing, and in Hydra you can actually create a Hydra material and assign the texture to these things, so you can actually see a very accurate depiction of what the material actually is in the render time. But for me, I'm just using a simple color, and it's a random color. Sometimes I try to find a color that I think in my mind makes sense. Emissive material, I mean yellow because of light, I don't know. So, but it doesn't matter, it could be random. And once I create these objects, the only thing I'm doing here is changing their colors. It's the only thing. I have nothing else set. And once you look at it, you can see that all of the materials are assigned. So I know what's emissive. I know at least what's concrete, and I got this blue for the glass. So you can see if your collections are working. And the way I make sure that everything is contemplated by my collections is I have this viewer settings for everything. So everything that is inside the geo first gets this pink color. So if I have something that isn't contemplated in my collections or a viewer object settings, then this thing turns pink. So if this object is okay, and you can see that there's no pink in it, then I move on to another asset, and the new asset comes in and say it doesn't have maybe this concrete white material. I've never seen it before. Then I'll open the material. It will have some of the color assignments because it's not based on name, it's based on the attribute. But now I can very easily see that I'm missing a material. So I'll just select that geo, look at this attribute, and say, oh, okay, I didn't create a concrete mix white collection. So I'll go back here, create a concrete white collection, make sure that when I select it and it's selected and it's here, let's select something else so you can see, boom, and it selects the material. You can see there it's working, and then I can create a viewer object settings, choose a random color, and now I know this collection is taking everything. So I will go through a few of the objects, but not all of them, because there are too many. It should go one by one. I could, but I didn't. I just take a sample, and I trust statistics to make the rest, especially when you're doing Lookdev for 200 buildings, which is what I did in this case, 168 to be more precise. So this is how I work with these automatic assignments, right? Just by having this object settings, testing my collections, then I know that that I have a collection for everything. And these collections are a line of code that would just get the name of the shader that I have in this attribute. And it makes it very, very easy to go around the changes of names, of changes in locations. Maybe in modeling, they grouped things in version 2 that weren't grouped before, but it will still be assigned the correct material, because it doesn't matter. It matters only that it has that attribute. After you have these collections set, and I know that they work because I have them in viewer object settings, then I know I can work with my materials. And the way I work with, I Control Enter here, it's very obvious that what I use the most is actually child materials. And I have 1 material, 2, 3, and 4 materials in this. This is just a material that will be assigned to anything that doesn't have a material. So, and this is deletable. The way I do this is based on my textures and my shaders that I know of. I'll create a material that is the most versatile possible material, and this makes it into a very simple material. On these kitbash assets, I have only 3 textures per material. I have roughness, diffuse, and bump. So I created a very simple material that just anticipates what I need to change the most. So I know that I have to change this diffuse map very often, so I promote this diffuse map to be editable on the top level, and I do the same for roughness and bump here. And if I look at the image, then you see it appears as bump in the group maps, and I created these guys. And I also came here to the material and say, okay, so I want to do also work with the weight, and it will look, and I named it reflection weight because it's inside the reflection. They can have double similar naming, so you can have weight and weight having the same name. So I named it reflection weight. And as the group base properties, if I go to the top level now, press E, then I can see that inside base properties, which is the group I created, I have reflection weight and reflection roughness, and I also have maps for these. And now that I have this uber material, if you can say that, for this one kit, and it will pretty much only work for this one kit, unless all of the kits always have just these changes to them. And then I can create child materials. And child materials are a very powerful concept, that a child material is a clone of this material, but you have the ability to change whatever you expose from the base material. This is what makes it very powerful to work in bulk, in volume, is that if I do any changes to this material that are not overridden by the child materials, these changes will trickle down to all of the child materials. So if you have a general note of all these materials are too shiny, for example, then you can go into the main material, turn down the reflection, and then all these changes will trickle down. Say, now with this color correction here, I know that I can take all of the diffuse maps and take them down. I can take their gamma down by half. And now I have every single child material will be affected by this new change because it's not even exposed, and you can override it. But even if I do have this exposed to the top level and I have an override, then it won't change anything that is overridden already. So I can come here and you can see that things that I overrode with new textures, and I kept the bump from the original. Here I have to change all of them, and in the base properties I didn't have to touch much because most of it is far enough from camera that it doesn't make any difference at this point. But it's there to work all the materials individually, but they are all always checking back with the parent. So this child materials is something that it's very powerful to use when you're working in volume. And once I have created one material or one shader that I needed, especially based on my collections here, then I'm ready to do assignments. And with my material assignments here. This is a stack of all these material assignments that I have. So I have a base material, which will apply the base material, which is a pink material as well, just so I can see that something doesn't have an assignment. I have this being applied to all, and these are overriding it by the actual assignments that I need. So the concrete, so I have this concrete mix material, the white material, which is here, and it's being applied to anything that is inside the concrete mix white collection, which is driven by a line of code that will take anything that has this attribute with that name concrete mix. So this is how you make things work in volume. This concept is one of the things that allowed me to work and create this this whole little short film in so little time. It's because I use the power of these automatic assignments to quickly go over all of my assets. And if I have a new version of I need a new version for these KLFs, then I have this very simple script here that it's on my GitHub, and I will put the link here somewhere. And this script, it basically runs through recursively through every asset inside my model folder, and it will bake the KLF inside the KLF buildings. And I have an example folder here that I created just to show you. And if I run here, and I just want to make sure that I'm looking at the right things here. So I got the viewer. So if I run the script, it goes into that folder and bakes the KLF for each asset. So I don't have to even do this by hand, right? It went through, I don't know, 60 assets in one go, and now I have a new version for the KLF. So any changes are very easy to be updated when you have this thing going on. So using automatic assignments is part of being prepared for success. So you should also keep that in mind when you're working with collections and doing assignments for textures. And you can anticipate these massive changes and new versions and working with multiple assets just with a simple recipe. Here on the lighting side is where we can actually play a lot with these new updates that Katana 3.6 have. And I think one of the things that I use the most is the snapping. I designed this project to be able to stress test these tools, and I felt like doing the layout in Katana, even though it's not meant for it, would be a nice opportunity to stress test this tool. And now shot one has this blank canvas. Basically, I have the road here, which is just at the curve from the first shot, and see like my camera is there, and all the buildings are on the origin of this map, which is in the middle of the crater that I very simply created for this tutorial, so for this webinar. So now with my tools, with these buildings in the center stage, then now I know I have to do I have to place them in my map. So the way I do this, and first thing I use the docking of the scene graph. For me, being able to full screen and have a panel that you choose, and it could be anything. I could be full screen and keeping my Python tab or the attributes on the other side. Then if I can full screen and work and still be able to pick the buildings here, that's such a great thing to do. So I can actually have the tools that I choose to have all full screen and in my screen instead of having just one at a time, which was the current way of working up until now. And I feel like I've used this a lot in conjunction with the monitor setting here. It's experimental, but I approve it. I only used monitor for this whole thing, and I have used it since the last version, I think, when it came out. But it keeps proving so useful, and I'll show you how it works. And now I have my Hydra here. So basically, the way I started doing this, I started just snapping it, and I just want to show how this would be done without snapping, right? So I'll take this first building here, and I want to put it on the corner of this street. And let me open this guy. Okay, so I want to put this building there. The way this works is I would probably put it into a nice vantage point. I kind of move this here, maybe look from the top, drag it here. But now it's sunken in the world, so I'll have to put this here. And so it's a little bit of a, I mean, it's business as usual, I guess. Like, this is how we've always done it before we had the ability to snap. So I'm used to this. I'm glad I don't have to use it anymore. But so this is like a way of doing it, right? And when I look here from my camera, okay, my render cam, let me turn this off for a second. So, okay, so now I have this building here, and then I can just look at it. It's probably facing the wrong way. Okay, boom. Okay, let's do this like that for the time being. Okay, so I have this one building there. Now, what I can do instead is use snapping. And with snapping, I don't even need the perspective view here. I can just full screen here on my monitor. Take this, snapping, and I'm going to snap to the surface, and the surface is here, and boom. It's like magic. And I can't tell you how much I like this. So I'm going to start a live render, so we can play with this a little bit. Boom, live render. Full screen this again. Turn on this monitor layer, and this is how I did all of these shots. I'm looking from the camera point of view, and I started just dragging my assets from zero to here. And as the render starts, I can see. Okay, there you go. So I have this, and I can just activate the live render for this asset and wait for the updates here. Oh, wrong one. Boom. There you go. So now I can kind of place this interactively, and then I can turn this off since I know it's on the ground plane. Okay, so this is filling this piece. Let's put a building here in front of the camera, and even without needing to see the render itself, I'm going to get that one building. I'm going to snap it. Now it's here, and I know now I can even adjust. If I knew where it was rotated, but if I open here, boom. Okay, so I can now adjust it so we can see, and we can drag here a bit, maybe. Let's see a little of this front side. Boom, done. And now I know, just without rendering, because I can see my geometry overlaid on top of my render, I can already tell. I mean, I could activate this and see the result, or I could just close it and move on to the next building. I'm going to activate it, and now I can go back to just the bounding box, and now it's there. So every single building can be easily dragged with this in this mode. And I don't know if I'm using this, boom, and drag it until it touches, and I can see the geometry, so I know. I mean, I can even intersect them if I want to. That's how accurate you can be using this. So back to bounding box, let's activate this, boom. Now it's in there, right? So all of these buildings were placed just like that, and it doesn't matter that this is in front. I can drag it here, and I keep dragging all the buildings. So this is basically how I did it. Of course, like some of the buildings I didn't like as much, or I had to change, but once they're kind of like around this this avenue, curve, highway thing, then I can come here to the viewer, and I can start moving these things around if I want to dock this full screen, use the monitor, and work in layout using snapping, and you don't have to keep getting out of here, going on, selecting the building, and just dragging it by hand and hoping that it's going to be on the right place. Cool, thanks. So these are 3 updates in one go. So the last update that Katana 3.6 have that I wanted to touch on is something that influences my work as a lighter every day. So whenever I have to do material edits, I can only use, theoretically, I can only use whatever the Lookdev artist exposed for me to use in lighting. But sometimes you need to add a different thing that is not anticipated here. So instead of kicking it back and have that to be exposed, or use a couple of different tools to be able to edit this material inside lighting in a user interface that is not very intuitive, Foundry created this network material edit node that will not only let you edit the expose parameters, but it also lets you jump into the original material and add something new to this the material graph. So now for this one material here, for the shot number 2, it was getting too bright. So I just came in here, added a color corrector, and pushed the gamma down by a lot. So just to adjust that for that one shot. So this makes in material override so much easier and so much more intuitive than how it used to be. So props to Foundry for kind of pushing the artist friendliness of these tools. And from now, when I look at this material, it's very easy to see what I've changed. There's a green node here that is that it signifies it's a new thing. The yellow ones were overridden somehow, and the gray ones weren't touched at all. So it's very fast. You can very easily see what has been changed for this material, and still using the same user experience that the Lookdev artists have. So this is a very nice update, especially for us in lighting when we need to do these small changes, and this makes it more intuitive to work with than how it used to be. Like, it used to be a more adventurous path you need to take to edit these materials, and now anyone can open this and edit a material in this intuitive way and color-coded way, which is really nice. So lastly, I want to talk about environment variables. And this is not new in Katana, this has been here for a while. And for me, when you're working in volume, or whichever volume you're working, if it's 10 shots or if it's 50 shots in a sequence, the environment variables are one of the most powerful things, and it was the thing that convinced me the most of always working with Katana as much as possible and as much as I can. And I have a few examples here, and I think that the most basic example is a variable switch. You can create a variable here in the project settings, variables, and if you know Katana, you know this very well. And you can create a bunch of them that can drive not only the shot, you can drive render quality, you can drive a bunch of little changes that you want to have in your script. But now I created just this variable shot, and if I turn this off and I change this now to shot 2, for example, then you see that my whole layout will change. And even my camera changes because it's all being driven by this variable switch. So if you look at the node graph in here, when I change to shot 2, then it highlights where it's going. So now I know that shot 2, the environment variable says, the environment variable is basically saying, it's basically looking at the variable called shot. And if this variable, the value of this variable is shot 1, then you activate the branch shot 1, and so on for 2, 3, and 4. So this is a very, very straightforward way. You don't have to do any development for this to work. This comes built in Katana. Katana is made for this, and it makes it so much easier to add logic to your scripts. When you have this setup here with an environment variable, I can work with as many shots as I can wrap my head around in one script. If I am organized enough, I could work in 50 shots in just one recipe. So you can work with this variable, this global variable here, and you can even render based on the global variable. You can send this off to the farm saying, I want to render with the variable shot 2 active, shot 3 active. This has applications even in your render farm. So you can have one recipe being used to render multiple shots at once, because all you need to do is pass a different argument for the shot variable name. So you can render shot 1, 2, 3, and 4 at the same time with just one recipe. And this is very powerful. Another nice way of doing this is not only using global variables, but you can also use variables, local variables. So I have local variables that I've created here for these branches, which are the bike and the environment branch. And you can name the variable whatever you want as long as it's the same. So I have a render layer with a value of bike, and then I have the render layer with the value of environment. So this identifies this branch here as environment and this branch here as the bike. So if you're rendering from the branch, you can create a variable switch that is not connected to the global variable, but it's connected to this local variable that you created in your recipe. So it looks for the render layer variable, And if the render layer is variable is bike, then you activate the bike branch. And if it's the environment, then you activate the environment branch. And so now we're starting to add so much more logic to it, because now on shot two, the environment variable will do this, or which in this case is nothing. But if I change for shot 3, for example, now we know that on shot 3, so we're nesting logic here. So first we have the shot, and now with shot 3, the environment layer will have this override that will only work for the environment layer, just because when it renders from here, it will take that path. And nesting inside this logic, I also use a variable enabled group, which is just like a variable switch, but it will enable based on just one parameter, and will disable if this parameter is not met. So because this is shot 4, it's grayed out, so it's not active. So anything you put here, you can just delete the whole scene, prune the whole scene. But if the prune is here, it will not prune anything if it's not shot 4. So with the variable enabled groups, I can also do change based on the shot on the branch of the environment. So once you start adding this to your workflow and the use of variables, you can create optimizations like this. I have my lighting overrides here for per shot, but I also have optimizations. I have prunes that are removing assets from different camera points of view. I have the transform, moving just one asset just for one of the shots. And so you can start to add shot level overrides in this one recipe, and if you gather enough of them, then basically you can have a whole sequence being driven by this variable logic, and that it makes it easier for any future updates that you only have one scene. You can render everything from one scene. You can, if there's a new material or a new shader or a new animation, you can easily open this, and this will be available to be rendered for all of the shots. So if I have a new if I have a new animation for the hover bike, which I did because in the first few shots I didn't animate the swings, but for the shot 4 I had to go in and animate the wings. So I just updated here, and now I have this new animation, even though it doesn't change anything for the first shots, but now I have this animation available for the 4 shots. So if I render this again, all of these shots will have a new animation. So I can have another layer of animation. Say I had a rough pass of animation, which is basically what I did, and this, as far as I got you, it's a rough pass of animation. But if this animation changed to being a lot more finessed through all of these shots in the path that the bike takes, then I can just update this alembic with this animation, and now I can batch render all of these in one go with this new animation for the sequence. So using variables is one of the most powerful things you can use in Katana, and it's really what allows you to work in volume. As a lighter, before working with Katana, I've had to go into work Saturday and Sunday just to update 30 shots, new cameras, new frame range, and put it on the farm one by one. And Katana allows you to do that with no development. This is built in Katana. You don't have to hack Katana to make it work. So Katana is a software that I really like because it allows me to do more lighting than the non-subjective repetitive tasks of the everyday. And by working with Katana, I'm able to be more productive, and I'm more prepared for success. If this short, done in less than a week of work, has pleased a client and they hire me to do a whole 30 seconds spot with a bunch of new scenes, then I'm ready to go. So this is being prepared for success, or at least I know if it's a whole new project, then I have the logic already. I understand how to work in volume, and I understand how to deliver more than one artist would naturally do without being able to use these tools. So be prepared for success. Be prepared to do more than you are required at the moment, and learn how to do these bigger projects by anticipating these bigger needs and bigger overrides. So thank you so much for coming with me in this ride of pipeline productivity considerations, and I hope you liked it. Let's go for some Q&A. I'm excited for this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for all the work you put into that, Abel. I think we've actually got the short queued up just to play it again, just so you guys, after seeing how it all came together. So if you could run that. Very cool. Thank you very much, Abel. That was awesome. I think it's, I've had, occasionally people reach out on LinkedIn and other ways to basically, share similar stories, but 168 assets in, all, start to finish, 40 hours. That's pretty awesome. So I guess we can dig into some of the questions, and Gary will join us. And here's Gary. So as these two gentlemen have actually spent the time with Katana in production, I'm going to let them have the conversation. You guys all know me very well. I'm Mr. Katana fan, so I'm biased. We'll let these two guys.
Thank you very much. I think that was a really great presentation, and I hope everyone got something out of it. So if anyone has any specific questions for Abel, feel free to pop them in the chat or in the questions section. But I'm going to start off with just asking you a little bit about kind of, was Maya your kind of main software before you came to Katana for doing any kind of lighting?
Yeah, I think the whole industry kind of relies a lot on Maya as the main tool, and studios try to use that one license as much as possible, and a lot of the times this becomes unproductive because you're stretching a tool to do so much more than it was designed. And what I like about Katana is that it was designed to do this volume type of work, right? And Olia is with me in the same team. I'm also I don't want to ever work in Maya again if I can help it. I feel like I've done also freelance myself. I've done 3 Lego advertisements, and I had to do it in Maya. And towards the end of the project, whenever you have and just like for me is just the amount of time you lose opening a shot, saving S, and adjusting the render layers by hand for every shot. It's worth your time already, just working Katana. Just this basic part. I remember having to assign these lasers to their own layer, and they would change names, and I couldn't do a simple custom line as we can do in Katana, just to say, okay, anything that's called laser red, just go into here. No, we have to kind of grab the asset and throw, and this was like, it was most of the time I spent on that project was just technical. And instead of just doing lighting, right? So for me, and what I really love working with these variables, it just allows me to have this view of the sequence, but also do these shot overrides and just in one file. And have I had work in these freelances specifically with Katana, I think I would have done a work that took me 2 months to deliver, probably in 2 weeks. Just to be able to work this procedurally, right? So whoever is working in Maya knows the pain of having to, especially towards the end of the project when you have to a big note from the client, like, oh, everything, this one object which appears in every shot now has to have a new texture, which is something that you can't really fix and comp. So being able to work that way procedurally in Katana is something that every artist falls in love with, and I guess like Katana was created for that, right? Sony can only deliver 3 feature animations a year and a bunch of visual effects shows because they developed a tool that can offload this bottleneck that they had in lighting, right? And then Foundry came along and took us to a whole new level of user friendliness, optimization, easier to adapt to your own pipeline. So this is a tradition of working artistically and in volume, and I think that Katana is probably the best tool to do that in the market. So I love it. I'm biased too, because I work with it.
Yeah, but you're not paid to make it, so you know.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I can say it.
Yeah. No, it is definitely on our core missions.
So if you, I guess you've kind of answered the question, which was going to be, if you were forced to go back to Maya, which sounds like you've had to do it for some on some unfortunate occasions to answer
Yes.
What would you miss the most about Katana? And I think that some artists, when they've used Katana for a while, perhaps it gets a bit blasé. Everything's so easy, doing things inside Katana with those rules-based approach, do it once, rolls out across a whole bunch of assets or a whole bunch of shots. That having that pain of having to open things up, it's probably good for the soul every now and then, because that way you realize why you love Katana quite so much.
Yeah, I think like scene assembly, I think it's just so big when you can work. And Seth is asking a question related to the scene assembly. So it's geometry, import work, the scene graph variable switch. Yeah, some companies, they would have one importomatic for every shot inside the same file. They may choose to hide it in a super tool, so there's like importomatics inside that main importomatic that is driven by the shot variable, so you can do that. You can probably approach it in a few different ways, programmatically. But I think like having working in different shots, having all their importomatics in there and being driven by a variable switch is a very straightforward approach that everyone uses. So once you have that built, then the scene assembly is done, right? So, and this is what I really like about it, and why I chose to go for 4 shots in this little short. I could show how easy it is to not be able to open a new file, save as, get a render layer, get the environment.
Mm-hmm.
So these things that we have to really anticipate in Maya, and that anticipates a lot of our own work, can be solved by programmatically with environment variables. So definitely going back to Maya, scene assembly is my #1 thing that is really reminds how life is nice when you're working with Katana.
Absolutely. And I think you sort of touched on the point earlier, but the fact that you get the compound effect of your file opens in seconds, your file can contain, in your case, 4 shots. Yep. The record we've heard of was 120 shots in one Katana project file. So having that compound effect of you're not waiting 20 minutes for every file, and then you can affect, like from a sequence level or group level, so many shots at the same time.
Yeah, and this is something I actually say on the presentation, is like you can work on as many shots, you can wrap your head around it, because Katana can do it. It's about you being able to organize yourself in a way that you feel like you can work with. Because you can work as many as one. You can put a whole film in that one recipe if you are really a trooper.
Well, you can also break bits of it up as well. So you could say, for the entirety of my entire shot, this is how I'm going to set up my render settings, and that could be in the live group and shared between a whole bunch of people.
And I use live groups.
Of it. Yeah,
I use live groups as well, and it's something that I didn't talk about in my presentation, but all of my AOVs are in a live group, so I can change these based on a project, and I can change that during the project. Say like we want a new AOV for something, and it's not stock in the show, and you can just add that into one file and have that propagate to the whole team. And these are, having your lead being able to indirectly add something to your shot and make it work for you without having to open your file and have that propagate for everyone else. If this is a sequence level problem or solution, then live groups is such a powerful tool to have at hand, and it's one of the things that allows us to work in more volume as well. I just didn't cover it. There's a lot of these amazing little things that we use in the everyday life, but live groups is definitely one of them.
Well, it's also pretty trivial to the amount of pipeline code it would take to automate updating a Katana script.
Yes.
So that when it comes to, like, if there's a new animation version, having a lighter from animation, a lighter doesn't need to touch it if their job is done. It just passes through and on the way out.
Yeah, and my personal experience at Sony, which has a very, very good pipeline, most of the times we do our work, and then we're just waiting for other departments, like animation to finish up, effects to finish up, and I remember the time where lighting was the bottleneck, and everything was coming to us, and we were like, "Oh my God, I can't render all this." And now most of my times working in animation, which is my few, like, this recent years of experience, just like most of the times we're done waiting for other departments, and it feels great. It feels bad for the other departments now that they're in line, but for us it's great. Like, not having this stress.
Changing decades of production history. So guys, there's a question up here, and I think both of you are well positioned to answer this. So is knowledge of Python or Lua just an addition, or is it like really sort of an important part of being a Katana artist?
I think from my experience, when you first start, if you get a job as a lighter at a place that's using Katana, you can get up and running without really understanding the Pyre or the Lua kind of side of things initially. But the more you get to grips with kind of the workflow, the more you might want to learn it, because it will solve things for you very, very quickly. Especially the Lua is kind of a very powerful way for you to be able to interact with all of the attributes that make up that scene. So if you want to optimize something, and it's something that Abel is looking a bit sheepish at, but it's a really, really powerful tool, but you don't have to use it to be able to do lighting in Katana at all. I don't think Abel's used it that much, and he's managed to survive a while in the industry without it.
Yeah, I mean, I've taught myself Python a while ago, and I got to this one level which is like for looping. This is my expertise. I can for loop stuff, and it's as far as I used to know more, I think, of Python, but I kind of never use it. But then being able to just iterate through a scene and grab the things that you want in one line of code is very helpful. Most of the lighters do not need to learn anything at all. Like, in a company, I hardly type a line of code in Python or Lua. If you guys see in the community forum, the one that I promised a keg of beer to Gary, it was him convinced me that Lua was really nice, right? For me as not a programmer, learning Python was hard enough, and I was like, okay, I'm done. Like, I just want to know Python because Python is easy. And then with 2 lines of code, I managed to add this attribute to all the objects in my Katana scene in Lua. And I was like, okay, wow, this is great. Now I want to learn Lua as well. But this is based on my interest. It's not based on industry needs. Unless you want to go for a TD position, you don't need to learn any programming at all. Just the logic of programming is already visually in Python. Like, this variable switches are shortcuts to not program something. It's programmed for you.
Yeah, to give you an idea of just how many artists really get to grips with things like Lua and Python, on one of the shows I was on, we had about 70 lighters. So it was a big show, and probably 4 or 5 of those lighters really use Lua to any kind of regular kind of day-to-day thing. So you can easily get away with learning Maya and learning Katana and getting an awful lot of that benefit without having to learn the kind of Python or Lua. So don't worry about that. Open it up, get lighting, get to grips with the graph state variables and multi-shot lighting, and you don't have to really worry about OptScript or that side of things.
Yeah, what we usually tell people is that the people that have to learn the most about the details of Katana are the people setting up the pipeline and making process choices. As an artist, when you walk into a pipeline or you're just using it bare bones, it's always fairly straightforward. I think one of our staff members, Ariel, she said that she was productive on her first day when she rolled into Mikros.
Yeah. And this is a very nice thing about lighting in Katana as a lighter. I know, and I've seen people having to get into a Maya pipeline coming from different softwares, and then coming to Katana. And my experience, especially working in any company, actually, as Cinesite, Atomic, and Sony, everyone's onboarding in Katana is in a week. And a week, it's maybe too much. Like, I feel like after 2 or 3 days of training, you can light, and the rest is just like, is the pipeline choice. It's like, how do you send this to the farm and how do you publish that for review? But it is very, very quick to pick up the minimum that you need to learn from Katana to actually be working. And compared to other softwares, the learning curve is much steeper. Even softwares that are standard in the industry, like Maya, it takes a lot less knowledge and training to start lighting in Katana for sure. This is not, at least on my experience.
Yeah. Okay. Just looking through some of the questions, we've got most of them covered. I would say, I guess maybe a bit of a trivia. What do you think is the gnarliest thing that you've had to light in Katana that you're like, whew, glad I was doing that in Katana?
Oh, well, I think, I don't know. I feel like it's always about sequence setup that I'm glad I'm working Katana. When you can light one recipe thinking of all the shots that you have assigned to yourself and knowing how this is going to be used in every shot, and that the work in one shot is not going to be repeated. The work you put on in this one recipe won't have to be repeated. I feel like this is where I feel like I'm actually lighting. The work I do is for me to light and not just to for one shot. Like I can use my creative time instead of using this technical time most of the parts. So I feel like it's about sequence setup. I find shot assembly, and this is something that I appreciate every day. It's not a specific show or a result. It's just knowing that I'm using my time for lighting and to make things pretty instead of just battling with the software to be allowed a 15-minute break in lighting, which is usually what we try to which is it becomes the biggest part of your work, lighting, instead of the biggest part just doing the technical side.
Yeah. What about you, Gary?
I've lit some as Abel pointed out, one of the traditionally Katana's always at the end of the pipeline. And what I've found is a lot of the departments kind of know the sort of specs of the machine that you're going to be able to do that final render on. So if they know that you're going to be able to put something on a 64 gig machine, they will provide you an asset that's at 50 gig. And what they don't realize is they're not the only people providing you something that's at 50 gigs. So by the time it all comes to you, ends up being 200 gigs worth of data that somehow you've got to get through that 64 gigs worth of 64 gig machine. So having all of the tools to bring that down inside one place, and then those optimizations that maybe you've used somewhere else, you can reapply, and you don't have to go hunting for them because they could be in your template. I had one shot in Lion King where it was a few hundred frames and it had like everything from effects. There was dust coming everywhere. Every animal's got hair, and there's 100 or so wildebeest trampling through, and you've got scatter up every single wall. And the first time you open the scene and you try and render it, and you say, can I borrow a 128 gig machine just to see how bad this is? And it still fails on a 128 gig machine. You know, you've got to kind of get to grips with it. So yeah, those kind of shots are the ones that you're very glad that you can play around with inside Katana, because you can use tools like interactive render filters to prune the hair just temporarily to see if you can render it. You can prune the scatter, and then you can introduce them gently and not have to like worry that that's going to end up in a final render. Just tools like that make that kind of ability to really work out where are going to be your big overheads really makes a huge difference. And how you'd even do that when you first try to open up a Maya scene that's got all those elements in, I honestly don't know how I would try and light something like that in a software like Maya. But Katana is definitely the tool for those kind of situations.
Yeah, interactive render filters it's such a small thing, and it's a lifesaver. It just being able to test something, send it to the farm, and knowing that you're not forgetting to reset a setting. How many times? Because going on the weekend to send renders to the farm, and then realizing that you send it half resolution because you're testing it, and then you're coming on Monday and everything is half resolution. You're like, oh my God, I just wasted so many resources, farm, everything. So interactive render filters are such a clever thing, and it's hard to work without it. I work with them on all the time. Like even for this short, they're always on.
Yeah, absolutely. Just so some of the audience who might not know that they're like nodes that you put at the end of the scene when you're just doing renders inside your Katana scene. And then when you put them on the farm at the end of the day, they just get ignored. So they don't get added, they don't get put in there. So they're a really safe way for you to do tests. And it's such a big, what seems like a small thing, but when you're doing your day-to-day thing, when you've set them up and you can put them and share them across the whole of your show or department, they can be put inside live groups, you know, and shared between everyone. Once someone's set them up for the entire show, they're an absolute lifesaver. They really are.
I worked on Smallfoot at Sony, which is a Yeti in the top of the mountain. So everything is effects cache, right? All the fur, all the snow, and so it was like a super heavy show. And I don't think I lit one shot looking at their fur, because I could just get the light and then do a test frame, because I didn't want to load and wait for the load of time. And so just using a simple render filter, which is like remove hair, so I can actually see the shot and work interactively. It's amazing. And then you can send that to the farm, and that node gets ignored, and then you can just work with it.
Yeah, absolutely. The time you can save with it, and it's one of those things that even when I first came back to Foundry after working on Lion King, they were asking me, so are interactive render filters something that's still used? Is it something we can maybe get rid of from some of the developers who have been there for a while? They don't realize just how much of an artist lifesaver they are. They would
don't touch the filters.
They went away. So yeah, it's a really great tool. That plus kind of the ability to choose what you expand and show in the viewer and things like that make your day-to-day that much more productive, and you can work that much faster.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you guys for that. I don't see any more questions popping in, and I think we could keep on going for hours, you know, with all the things that we love about Katana. So I think maybe we should call it an end here. But want to thank both of you. Abel, you know, thank you so much for all the work, you know, and putting together such an impressive little short by yourself and at home. Gary, thank you for joining in, the extra context around things. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And can please, you know, keep an eye out. Come to more of the virtual events. Keep your eyes posted for the details of the Foundry Live. And yeah, you'll see Gary and I there. And it'll be an event worth coming to for sure. So without further ado, everybody have a good day, good night, wherever you are. Thank you everybody
for showing up.
Thanks, everyone.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.